Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and these are my quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings for Week 4. There are a few players who I did not rank, most notably Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback, who is on IR for another 3+ weeks. But it looks like Jordan Love and Justin Herbert are practicing, so I did include them in the rankings. Quarterback is starting to get a bit healthier, but tight end is banged up this week. Trey McBride is out with a concussion. David Njoku remains out. He will not return this week. And Evan Ingram, I still do not expect to play. He is doubtful at the moment at Houston. So tight end is rough. Some players we expected to trust entering the year are not available in Week 4. But we begin at quarterback. We're at number 1. I am definitely trusting Josh Allen. He has 2 games with 4+ touchdowns, and it was a blowout win where James Cook did everything in Week 2 when he did not do that. So definitely trusting him. He feels like a lock as the QB1 all year long. Number 2, I got Lamar Jackson versus Buffalo in the same game. It's probably going to be a massive shootout in primetime. I always trust Lamar Jackson. And at the moment, he's averaging 85 rushing yards per game. That's on pace for over 1,400, and you are very excited with Lamar if you drafted him. Number 3, though, another rushing quarterback would be Jayden Daniels at Arizona, and he's averaging 57 rushing yards per game on 4.5 yards per carry. That is definitely something you trust. He also has 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. He threw his first 2 passing touchdowns last week, and he's also yet to turn the ball over. So you're very encouraged. The floor is very high, and the ceiling is elite. Jayden Daniels feels locked in as a top 5 guy all year long in fantasy. Number 4, another rushing quarterback. I have Kyler Murray in the same matchup here versus Washington, and he is averaging 54 rushing yards per game, albeit on limited rush attempts. He's averaging 10.7 yards per carry, and that is fantastic. So you're very excited with Kyler Murray. The secondary is also the worst in the league on the Commanders side of the ball here. So the matchup is a massive upgrade. While he does not have Trey McBride, he still has Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson. I think they will be torching the Commanders this week. I think Kyler is a must start. But starting at number 5 is where the risk starts to creep in. I still rank Jalen Hurts in the must start category, though, because of the nature of his rushing upside. I still think you have to start him, but he is a player you're worried about. 6 total turnovers in 3 games is not ideal, and neither of his receivers are practicing due to a hamstring and concussion injury. So that is not good. The upside is definitely capped, but he still has Dallas Goedert and Saquon on the team, so the offense is still probably going to be okay. It's not an ideal scenario, but I think because he can give you 80+ rushing yards and maybe even multiple rushing touchdowns any week, I still think you have to start Jalen Hurts, but I would be downgrading my expectations in this game. Number 6, though, I have Brock Purdy versus New England, and the fact that Kittle and Debo are both practicing is an upgrade for his upside. That is definitely something encouraging. But I thought he's played very well in both of the last 2 losses. I don't think he's the reason why they're losing. So I think he's a great fantasy quarterback. I think he's locked into the top 12 all year long. And with both of those options available, I do give him an upgrade. That's why he's number 6 this week. I think they will have a get-right game here against a bad team like the Patriots. They probably hang 30+ on the scoreboard, and Purdy throws for maybe 3 touchdowns. So love his ceiling this week. I think he is fantastic in your lineup. He also ran for 40+ yards last week, and that's very encouraging to see. Hopefully, he gives you more consistent usage on the ground. Number 7 is where I ranked Dak Prescott entering Thursday Night Football, and he wasn't elite. He might not finish this high in the ranks, but he did have 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, with over 200 yards. That's decent. You're not going to be too upset about that. Quarterback has been very shaky this season, and that's a solid floor from Dak. So on the week, he probably finishes top 12, but number 7 feels a little bit high. I wish I could retroactively bump him down, but gonna stay honest. This is where I ranked him on Thursday, and players like CJ Stroud, who I have at number 8, probably outperform him this week, because Stroud was fantastic last year in this matchup. He averaged 25.7 points per game against the Jaguars. as a rookie. But Tank Dell looks to be inactive this week. Joe Mixon probably not going to play either. The Jags defense is nowhere near the battle that the Bears and Vikings are, and I do think Stroud will be fine. So I'm going to trust him. The Jags look terrible this season, and I'm flipping my pick. I made that call before I saw the Jags play on Monday night, and I do think the Texans win this game. So Stroud is a top 10 play. I don't think you can bench him. He has not lived up to the draft capital we were anticipating, however. So a little disappointing, but could pop off in this matchup. Number 9, though, I have Joe Burrow at Carolina, and this team is also tired of losing, similar to the Niners. This is probably a get-right game for the Bengals. And the matchup was elite last week, so I'm not expecting 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns guaranteed. I did not rank him top 3 like I did in week 3, but it's always possible with Burrow. All his receivers are healthy, so there's no more excuses. I think he's a top 10 play moving forward. Number 10, I have Patrick Mahomes at the Chargers, only averaging 220 yards per game with 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, only 16 rushing yards per game as well, is not elite. So he has not lived up to the draft capital. He is not the top 3 quarterback we were expecting. And I think Kelce's lack of involvement is the main reason why. But this is the matchup where Mahomes and Kelce typically dominate the Chargers. So it could be a get-right game as well. If you look at the last 5 games against the Chargers, Mahomes is averaging 332 passing yards per game with 15 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. That's an average of 23.7 points per game. So maybe Jesse Minter's defense gives him problems, but historically this is a spot where you definitely trust Mahomes. And while he does deserve a downgrade this season, he's been only quarterback 14 on a per game basis, averaging 14.4 points per game. I do still think you have to start him. I do still rank him top 10, but I am a little bit worried. He's been outscored in fantasy this year by Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, and Sam Darnold. That is not what we expected entering the year. Something is not right with this offense. And without Pacheco, I do worry a little bit about it. They might not score more than 20 in a tough defensive battle. So Mahomes, not elite at the moment, but the history for him against the Chargers suggests he will have a good game. I think you're starting him. At QB 10, he's still in the lineup. At number 11, though, I'm trusting my gut and I'm upgrading Caleb Williams here versus the Rams. I really like this matchup. It ranks top 3 so far against the quarterback position, allowing 21 points per game. Only one of 3 teams this season to give up an average of 20-plus fantasy points to quarterbacks so far. So that is definitely a good matchup. Their secondary is bad. They allow 259 passing yards per game with 7 touchdowns and only 1 interception. So I think Caleb catches a break here. He's thrown 4 picks in the last 2 games. And last week, he threw for over 360 passing yards. Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet did get going. So I like the upside here. I do think with Keenan Allen healthy, that's also a boost to Caleb's floor. And I do think he keeps it clean in the turnover department. So I like his potential to break out in this game. I really love the matchup, and I do think they win. I think the ceiling is unlocked for Caleb. He went over 20 fantasy points last week, and I do think he can do it again. I think Caleb will start to flash that Heisman winning potential very soon. This is a very good matchup to chase all year long. So upgrade Caleb Williams. I think he's a very legit streamer this week. I'm actually starting him in the subscriber league over Anthony Richardson. Number 12, I have Justin Fields at the Colts, and it's the rushing upside why I'm trusting him here. They're starting to trust him in the passing game as well. Last week, he actually only had 6 rushing yards, but also a rushing touchdown, and he could give you 80 plus in any given game if he needs to. So that's still an aspect of the equation here, but the Colts are a very bad run defense. I think that could be unlocked here. And Caleb Williams just threw for over 360 yards on them as well. So love the matchup. I think Fields is a very high floor play, and it looks like he's run away with this job. I am not worried about Russell Wilson at all moving forward. So I think Fields is going to be a legit top 15 quarterback moving forward. The floor is high and the rushing upside is interesting. It does give him some elite potential if it does hit at any point. So Fields, worth a pickup. I think he's a good option off the waiver wire. Number 13, though, is where I rank Anthony Richardson versus the Steelers. And it's really just the rushing upside that keeps him interesting. But I really do not like this matchup. He's looked bad the last 2 games, and I think it will be more of the same against Pittsburgh. You know they want to limit his mistakes. The Steelers will be a very difficult battle. And last year, they did beat the Steelers on the back of their run game. So I think they will be leaning more on Jonathan Taylor. I think they might give Richardson some more designed run plays in this game as well, as they need to limit his mistakes and turnovers. So as I mentioned, I am benching him for the second week in a row, this time for Caleb Williams, last week for Jared Goff, and that was the right call last week. So I would be worried. I'd probably bench him if I could, and I don't think this is the matchup you're dying to start him against. However, I do think he's an interesting buy low candidate, especially after this game, because the matchups are going to be way better than Pittsburgh and Chicago moving forward. He gets the Jags in week 5, and I think he'll be back inside the top 6 very shortly. So I do still believe in his talent. I do think from a fantasy standpoint, you still want him on your roster. I'm not cutting him at the moment, but I'm definitely not trying to start him. I'm not dying to do that this week. I do think it's risky against Pittsburgh. Number 14, though, I got Baker Mayfield versus the Eagles, and they just got embarrassed by Denver, so it could be a get-right game here. The Eagles, without their top 2 wide receivers, though, probably try and turn this into a defensive battle like they did last week against the Saints. So a little bit worried about it, but the young corners against Godwin and Evans probably don't work out. Baker does have a chance to splash here. He threw for 337 and 3 touchdowns in the playoff win last season, but also burned you in week 3 against the Eagles last year. Only threw for 146 and 1 touchdown. That was not good. So that game was in Philly. This game is in Tampa. I think it looks better, but I don't think he's a must start in this spot. They did just shut down Derek Carr and the Saints, and Baker was on the same level as Carr entering the season from what we expected. So a little bit worried about it. I don't think he's like elite, but I think he's fine. There is some upside potential in this matchup. Number 15, though, I have Jordan Love versus Minnesota, and it looks like he's healthy. I think he will be the starting quarterback against the Vikings, but their defense has looked really good in Minnesota. I do worry about it. They kind of shut down Purdy and Stroud over the last 2 games. So that's why I'm downgrading him. I think Jordan Love will probably crack the top 10 as soon as next week, but given the MCL injury as well as the matchup, I don't think he's a must start this week. I'm not dying to start anyone against the Vikings defense. So no thanks this week. I think he's more of a streamer, not a must start. And in the same game, I do have Sam Darnold at number 16 right behind him. He's been very efficient this year, completing 68% of his passes with 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Only 219 yards per game, though, is not going to carry you to an elite floor. So I worry about this divisional matchup. It could be a low-scoring game overall, and I don't think he throws for more than 2 touchdowns in this one. But Kevin O'Connell is helping him a lot. He does look really good, and I understand if you think this rank is too low, but he gets the Packers in division this week, then the Jets in London week 5, followed by a bye. So I actually don't think he has much starting value over the next 3 games. I think he'll be top 15 consistently after that point, especially when Hawkinson is healthy, but at the moment, he does not crack my top 10. He is not a must start, in my opinion, the next 3 weeks. Number 17, I have Geno Smith at Detroit, and Geno actually has more fantasy points than Mahomes this year, but it looks like Kenneth Walker will be back, and they might be leaning more on the run. However, the Lions defense is elite at stopping the run, so they probably have to lean on the pass a little bit more. I think Geno has a very legit floor this week with some chance to boom. However, the Lions have only allowed 3 passing touchdowns so far this season, so I don't think he throws for more than 2 touchdowns, and it's probably a low-scoring game. I don't think he's a must-start at this point, but is top 20, is legit in Superflex formats. Number 18, probably the last quarterback I'm really considering would be Aaron Rodgers versus Denver, and I loved what I saw from him in week 3 versus the Patriots. His mobility is back, and that's something he needs in order to create some magic. So I love his floor. He very rarely throws interceptions, so he's kind of safe, but the Broncos have only given up 150 passing yards per game this season, and they did just shut down Baker Mayfield. So I wouldn't expect the world from him here, but he rarely throws interceptions, and that's the saving grace. His floor is decent. Number 19, I have Derek Carr followed by Kirk Cousins in the same matchup, back-to-back, 19 and 20. And I think it's a low-scoring game. I'm not dying to start either of them. And last year, Derek Carr threw 0 touchdowns in the loss at Atlanta. So I think he'll look better at home later in the season, but I do think it's a decent option. I think Olave and Shaheed might get going. Kamara offers some yak potential as well. So he's interesting. Not the safest play. Last week he burned you, but I think he is top 20. You could do worse. And Cousins, I think, is also top 20, but he hasn't unlocked his ceiling yet. I think until Kyle Pitts is consistently involved, it's not going to be like elite from Cousins. So no thanks. I think he's only viable in super flex leagues. I'm not dying to start any of these quarterbacks at this point. And number 21, I have Jared Goff, who's more of a floor play. He has not looked as good as we expected in the dome games so far this season. And against the Seahawks defense, it's a bad matchup. Mike McDonald's defense completely shut him down last year when he coached the Ravens, and I do worry about it, especially without LaPorta being 100%. I think it's a downgrade for Goff for sure. So not going to start him this week. I think he barely gives you like 13 points in this game. Number 22, I have Andy Dalton versus the Bengals, and it is a revenge game for him here. That was the team that drafted him. So maybe he shines, maybe he looks as good as week 3. He's the only quarterback this season to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the same game before Joe Burrow did it on Monday. So he's interesting, but I'm not willing to completely buy in just yet. I want to see it one more time. Until then, he's just a low-end super flex consideration in your lineup. Number 23, I have Daniel Jones, who I did rank at 22 yesterday, but that was before I ranked Jordan Love, so he does move down. And he wasn't terrible, but he did not throw a touchdown in that game. He threw for 281, but nothing on the ground. He also threw an interception. Quarterback 23 kind of feels close to where he'll finish on the week. Number 24, I have Stafford at Chicago, who did get the win last week, but only threw for 221 and 1 touchdown. I think he might throw some interceptions as well against the Bears, and his ceiling is capped until his receivers get healthy. No thank you. This is a bad matchup against Chicago. And Justin Herbert, I don't think is a player you're trusting at all. He does not offer much upside, and he could also get benched if he aggravates that ankle injury. So too risky to start. No thank you with Herbert. I think you're benching every single quarterback moving forward. And 26, I have Lawrence at Houston, and without Evan Ingram, there's nothing to be excited about. This offense has looked terrible. So even though Brian Thomas looks good, no thank you with T-Law. Number 27, I have Bo Nix, who is yet to throw a passing touchdown yet, but his rushing value, I think, is underrated. An average 36 rushing yards per game this season with 2 rushing touchdowns keeps the floor somewhat interesting. But against the Jets, no thank you. I do think he's more interesting next week against Las Vegas. He'll probably crack the top 20 pretty soon. Number 28, though, I got Will Levis at Miami, and the turnovers are just too risky to bet on. He is a must bench most of the time. And so is Deshaun Watson. I have no confidence in him. He does give you 28 rushing yards per game, but it's just not enough. He has more turnovers than touchdowns this year, and that's not good. Number 30, I have Gardner Minshew, who could get benched again. That's what happened last week. He's giving you 1 touchdown and 1 interception every single game, and now Devontae Adams has been ruled out. No thank you with Minshew. Number 31, I have Jacoby Brissett, and fuck no at this point. I think he could get benched if the score gets out of hand. We might see Drake May in this game for the 2nd week in a row. Number 32, I have Tim Boyle versus Tennessee, and I'm not even sure if he'll be the starter. It could be Skylar Thompson, so fuck no with the Dolphins quarterback. There is no chance you're starting him. And I did rank Drake May, Aiden O'Connell, and Taylor Heineke. I do think there's a world where all 3 of them get some snaps in this game if the starter does get benched, whether it's from a lack of performance or just injury with Justin Herbert. So that's it at quarterback. Let's move on to tight end, where, as I mentioned, McBride, Njoku, and Evan Ingram are not ranked due to injury. But at number 1, I am trusting Travis Kelce this week. I think you have to, because he gets the Chargers. If it was not this matchup, I would not upgrade him at all, because he has been atrocious this year. An average of 2.7 receptions per game for 23 yards per game is not even 4 points per game. So you are getting nothing from Kelce. He is a liability in your lineup. He has not scored a touchdown as of this point. But I think they are picking their spots with Kelce this season. He's 35 years old next month, and they know it's a marathon, not a sprint. I would expect him to look dominant in January when they do make the playoffs. But Until then, you're looking for playoff type environments in order to trust him, and that is what this game represents. The Chargers are a very legit threat in the AFC, not only the AFC West, but the entire conference with the Chiefs, and they do not want a divisional tie. If they lose, they would both be 3-1. Without the tiebreaker, that would be bad. So I do think the Chiefs step up. I do think they win this game, and historically, Kelce owns this matchup. If you look at the last 5 games against the Chargers, he's averaging 10.8 targets per game, 8 catches per game for 128 yards per game and 6 touchdowns. That's an average of 24 half PPR points on a per game basis. So that is elite. That is what I am trusting. That's the reason we still drafted Kelce as a top 3 guy. And history suggests you have to trust him. He's going to go off in this matchup. So that's why I rank him here, but it's kind of a prove it spot. I think if he doesn't show up in a matchup he historically dominates, then you are absolutely hitting the panic button and you are terrified of starting him moving forward. I think you're probably streaming the position if you have Kelce and he sucks this week. But it's a get right matchup for him. I think this is the game where he does pop off. I'd be trying to sell high after this game because I'd be terrified of his outlook rest of season. He looks washed. He looks like a bad option, but I'm just trusting the matchup. That's what I'm leaning into with this number 1 overall rank in week 4. Number 2, though, is probably the player you trust even more. If you have Goedert and Kelce, I would probably just start Goedert because A.J. Brown has not practiced yet this week with a hamstring injury. Devontae Smith has not practiced either with a concussion, and 10 plus targets is locked in. We could see 15, even 20, as Goedert is the only weapon in the passing game for Jalen Hurts. So he could go for another 170 receiving yards this week. He is definitely locked in to 10 plus targets, and he is an automatic start while A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are out. It might only last 1 week, but while you need to ride the wave, and he will carry you to victory this week. Goedert is an elite must start in week 4. Number 3, though, I have George Kittle versus New England, and I still love his odds to score a touchdown. He was limited in practice this week, and I do think he plays, and they just lost 2 in a row. They will bounce back. I expect a blowout win versus the Patriots, and Kittle could score 2 touchdowns, especially if Debo doesn't play, but Debo has been limited in practice as well, and that kind of limits his upside, but I do think he finds the end zone. I do think he's a top 3 tight end this week. George Kittle should be elite in this matchup. Number 4, though, I definitely am starting Brock Bowers. He had a bit of a hiccup last week, but he still looked very good this season. He's one of the safest options you can find at the tight end position, and especially with Devontae Adams ruled out, I would expect 10 plus targets from Bowers, but I would worry about the touchdown hitting. It's not the best matchup against Cleveland, and that's why I do rank Kittle above him. I think the touchdown hits for Kittle does not hit for Bowers, but he's one of the only 5 tight ends you trust this season. You are definitely locking him into your lineup moving forward. Number 5 is where I ranked Jake Ferguson entering Thursday night, and while he did not score a touchdown, he did catch all 7 of his targets for 49 yards, and as someone who has him, I was not upset at all with 8.4 points from tight end. So his floor is going to be very high all year long. The touchdowns will inevitably hit. I think he'll consistently be ranked top 6, if not top 5, all year long. We'll see if Kelce continues to be ranked above him. But number 6, I have Dalton Kincaid at Baltimore, and this offense is just a little bit too erratic to fully trust. But he did find the end zone last week. You're very encouraged to see that. So did everyone else, however, and it could be a rotating guy as the number 1 target for Josh Allen every week. So he's still a must start, but the volume is not as high as we expected entering the year. However, this game is probably a shootout on Sunday Night Football, and even if he gives you 40 yards again, the touchdown odds are pretty decent. Kincaid is a must start every single week, and the Ravens have also been a top 2 matchup for tight ends this season, but it's still too small of a sample size for me to fully trust. I am still starting Kincaid, though. At number 6, you have to. Number 7, though, I think you have to start LaPorta, but you're not that excited. He's not fully healthy at the moment, but he did return to practice on Friday. So if he plays, you have to start him. There aren't that many tight ends lower ranked that I think you trust more. And he has been a big letdown so far this season. He has not lived up to tight end 1 so far. But At some point, the touchdown will hit. At some point, I do think he'll get back to what we expected. And until then, though, he does move down the rankings. At number 7, you are disappointed with LaPorta. And you're a little disappointed with Kyle Pitts as well. He's my tight end number 8 this week against the Saints. You're not totally happy with what you've seen, but he has scored a touchdown. He also had a 50-yard catch last week as well. You don't get that very often from tight ends. So it could be a lot worse. He's not elite, but the targets have been increasing. It went from 3 in week 1 up to 4 in week 2. And last week it was 5, although he only caught 2 of them. So no, he's not a great option, but especially with McBride out this week, it's very obvious he's a top 10 play. There are very few tight ends you actually trust more than Kyle Pitts right now. So if Kelce doesn't go off, you'd probably rather have Pitts over Kelce rest of season. And that is emblematic of the state of the position. So don't be too upset if you drafted Kyle Pitts. At some point, he will score another touchdown. The matchup is also top 5 this week against New Orleans, and he is definitely a top 10 play in week 4. Number 9, though, I'm worried about Mark Andrews because I'm really not sure about his role moving forward this year. And he gets Buffalo this week, so maybe it's a shootout. Maybe he finds the end zone, but that hasn't happened yet this season. And while he did look okay in week 2, he was terrible in week 1, and he gave you a bagel last week that was mostly due to game script. But knowing that that can happen is a really big red flag. I'd be very concerned about him, especially given Likely is looming in the background. But he has looked better than Likely for the most part. I still think if you're starting a Ravens tight end, it would be Mark Andrews, but the touchdown needs to come back, and without it, there is no upside. So very risky with Andrews. I'm not excited, but at this point, you're pretty desperate at tight end. Number 10, though, I have Cole Kmet versus the Rams, and very encouraged. Last week, he had 11 targets, 10 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. He had 16 targets over the last 2 weeks without Keenan Allen, but it looks like Keenan Allen will be playing this week, so that does make him less safe. And I would be worried about it because in week 1, he had 1 target while Keenan was on the field. So it's a true toss-up what his role is actually going to be this week with all the weapons available in Chicago. It is hard to trust. But last week is definitely encouraging. I understand you're kind of chasing the good game. It could look like Isaiah Likely in week 1, where in week 2, he was very bad, but tight end is a really tough spot this season. And I think he's a legit streaming option off the waiver wire. Kmet does look like a top 12 play this week with all the injuries at the position. But if you're just trying to avoid a bagel, I do think Zack Ertz is very legit this week against Arizona because Ben Sennett remains a non-factor. And Ertz has caught 12 of 13 targets this season. He's a very good safety blanket for Jayden Daniels. He's averaging 43 yards per game as well. He's been pretty efficient on his catches. So he's not going to give you a bagel. He is bust proof. He's pretty safe for about 6 points. And at tight end, you could do far worse than that. So I would consider starting him over even LaPorta. I think you could rank him higher, especially considering it is a revenge game. He used to play for Arizona, and Cliff Kingsbury used to coach there. He could dial up a revenge game touchdown for Zack Ertz in this one. So very interesting plug and play. I think Zack Ertz is one of the most coveted options off of the waiver wire if you are streaming the position. Number 12, another legit streamer is Brenton Strange of the Jaguars because Evan Ingram is doubtful this week, according to Coach Peterson. And Strange has 8+ points in 2 straight weeks filling in for Evan Ingram. He has 5+ targets in each game. And if you need to replace one of those injured guys, I think he's a very legit guy to do it with. The touchdown could hit, and even if it doesn't, the volume is safe enough to avoid a bagel. Number 13, though, I have Tyler Conklin versus Denver, and I'm not going to be expecting 90+ yards every week. Last week might have been his best game on the year, but he was averaging 8 yards per game in the first 2 games. Now the risk is very legit. It does creep back in. However, I was excited about him entering the year because I felt like he could step into the number 3 role in this offense any given week. And that's still a very legit possibility to happen again. It seems to rotate every week in New York, and it could settle on Conklin, especially as Garrett Wilson continues to have a slow start to the season. So I don't think he's a bad pickup. I think he's a legit bench stash. Probably not top 10 any week, but definitely top 15 if you are streaming the position. Conklin is legit. Number 14, though, is where you get desperate and where you're just chasing touchdowns. Dalton Schultz could do that because Tank Dell is probably not going to play. So without Joe Mixon, there is more red zone opportunity. However, Schultz has a maximum of 21 yards, no touchdowns through 3 weeks. He has major downside if he does not hit, and I get it if you don't want to even test your luck, but who knows, without Tank Dell, there is some upside. Number 15, though, I have Isaiah Likely versus Buffalo, and he's looked bad the last 2 games. Maybe week 1 was a mirage, but I'm not willing to completely give up on him. I think I'd still roster him for 1 more week, but I do think I'd prefer Mark Andrews at this point. But Likely could pop off in any game. He is talented enough to do that, and maybe you could do worse than Likely, but he's not safe, that's for sure. You could get a bagel with Likely. Number 16, though, I'm just chasing the floor, trying to avoid a bagel with Pat Freiermuth, who's kind of in the same tier as Ertz, but less efficient, only averaging 33 yards with no touchdowns. He has also caught 12 of 13 targets so far this season. So if you just want to lock up 5.5 points, then Freiermuth is a decent guy to do it with. He also gets a top 7 matchup against the Colts, though, but I wouldn't be expecting a touchdown. That feels very unlikely to happen. Number 17, another guy to avoid a bagel with would be Mike Gesicki. Now that Higgins is healthy, though, his ceiling does come down, but he's in the same tier as Freiermuth, and you are just playing it safe. He has at least 4 targets in every game this year, and the Panthers have been a top 3 tight end matchup. You could do a lot worse than Gesicki, but these tight ends moving forward, I think, are all staying on the waiver wire. I got Hunter Henry at number 18, and he had 12 targets week 2, but he had 3 targets, 2 catches in both weeks 1 and 3. He's not safe enough to trust. Number 19, a player I'm kind of interested in, but not safe enough yet, is Noah Fant at Detroit. He caught all 6 of his targets for 60 yards last week, and maybe is developing more of a role in this offense, but I want to see it happen one more time before I pick him up. Number 20, though, I have Colby Parkinson at Chicago, and 5 targets in 2 games this season is the only reason why I rank him. Until Puka and Kupp get back on the field, he does crack the top 20. But the last 5, I'll just rattle them off. I got Okonkwo, Tucker Kraft, Juwan Johnson, Cade Otton, and Tommy Tremble. You are praying for a touchdown with them. I would not pick them up off the waiver wire. And lastly, let's talk about defenses, where I do think there are some interesting options this week. But number 1, I got the Niners versus the Patriots, and I'm expecting a massive blowout win here. I do think they hold them to less than 10 points like the Jets did last week. At number 2, I got the Jets versus Denver, and their defense still looks elite. They're playing at home against a rookie quarterback who has yet to throw a touchdown. It's definitely a spot you want to start them. Number 3, though, the Steelers look like a lock in your lineup. If you have them, you're very excited. And against Anthony Richardson, there is some upside for mistakes. They could get like 4 turnovers in this matchup. But last year, they were very unable to stop the run against the Colts. It could happen again. There is a slight level of risk in this matchup. Number 4, though, I have the Titans at Miami, and anytime you face off against Tim Boyle, that's definitely a good spot. Stream the Titans this week. They are safe, and I did pick them to win. Number 5, though, I have the Chiefs at the Chargers, and this is assuming Herbert is the quarterback, but the tackles are banged up, and they're definitely going to have a better time stopping J.K. Dobbins. If that happens, then they probably limit Herbert and the wide receiver weapons as well. But if Taylor Heineke gets the start, then they're the number 1 defense on the week. I would vault them up as the best play. So definitely start them. Definitely pick them up if you are streaming the position. The Chiefs are locked in to the top 5 in week 4. Number 6 is where I rank the Cowboys entering Thursday Night Football, and they looked decent. They held the Giants to 15 points on 5 field goals. I think they will finish top 10 on the week. Number 7, I got the Vikings at Green Bay, and the Vikings have scored the most fantasy points on defense so far, and that was including the Niners and the Texans as their last 2 opponents. So gotta think they show up as well in division. They look locked into the top 10 all year long. Number 8, though, I got the Dolphins versus the Titans, and I don't trust their defense, but I definitely don't trust Will Levis. He could gift them another 3 turnovers. Miami is a top 10 play this week. Number 9, though, I'm trusting my gut, and I'm ranking the Bears here as a legit play this week. I know Kyren Williams could go off. He scored 3 touchdowns against the Niners last week, but I think the Rams come back down to earth, and if they stop him, then I think they can win the game, and I do think they play well at home. The Bears have the capability of being an elite defensive unit this season, and I do think it's a bit of a must-win to avoid falling to 1-3. So I think they're a legit top 10 play this week. I do trust the Bears from a floor standpoint. Number 10, I got the Seahawks at Detroit, and I know Seattle has not beaten anyone legit, but the Lions' offense is not clicking yet. They have yet to score over 20 points in regulation this year, and I think Seattle is a good floor this week with a chance to really pop off a massive ceiling, because last year Mike McDonald's defense in Baltimore completely shut down Jared Goff and this offense. It could happen again. I think the Seahawks are a sneaky play this week, and they will be a legit top 10 option all year long. Their defense looks legit. Number 11, though, I got the Browns at the Raiders, and Myles Garrett was limited in practice this week. It's encouraging that he might play, but he's on the injury report with a foot, thigh, and Achilles injury. I'm not excited about it, and there's a world where he does exit this game early if he aggravates it. So that's not good, but this matchup is definitely great. You trust any defense against Minshew, especially knowing that Adams was ruled out with a hamstring injury. So they could be a top 5 defense this week, but that's what we thought last week, and they were not. So there is a bit of risk. This could be a very low scoring game, and I do think the Browns are a legit start. If you have them, I probably wouldn't drop them just to pick up like the Titans or the Dolphins. I'd probably just roll them out there against Gardner Minshew. Number 12, though, I have the Saints followed by the Falcons at number 13. And in this divisional game, I think it's a very low scoring game. Neither team goes over 20 points. And that's why I think the floor is legit for both NFC South defenses. But I do think the Saints win. That's why I rank them one spot above. But the Falcons, I do think, are equally as legit. Number 14, though, I have the Raiders versus Cleveland, and the Raiders defense stunk last week versus Carolina, but they get Deshaun Watson this game, and they probably bounce back after being embarrassed at home. So I do trust them a little bit. I think they're fine, but not amazing. At this point, I'm probably benching these defenses. But number 15, I got the Texans versus the Jaguars, and the Jags look inept on offense. So in a divisional game, they should shut them down. These divisional games get weird sometimes, and that's why I don't think the Texans are like guaranteed top 10, but I might be too low. They could really pay off, and I get it if you're starting them. Number 16, though, I got the Packers versus the Vikings, and probably the last team I'm even considering in my lineup. In division at home, this could be a great play, but the Vikings also look deadly on offense right now. I'd rather just avoid it. The Chargers, though, could shut down the Chiefs. The Chiefs' offense does not look very good, but usually they get owned by Kelce, and if that happens again, they will burn you, so no thanks. I'm probably not going to press my luck with their defense. At 18, though, I got the Bucks versus Philly, and I know that the Eagles do not have either of their top 2 wide receivers, but they still have Saquon. It's not the best bet to make. Number 19, I got the Colts versus Pittsburgh, and the Steelers offense is still nothing elite, but the Colts defense hasn't given you much confidence either that they can shut them down. So just number 19. Number 20, I got the Lions versus Seattle, and the Lions could get boat raced here. I do not trust their secondary. I would pass on Detroit. Number 21, I got the Eagles at Tampa, and maybe they turn this game into a defensive battle like last week, but they probably struggle to stop Godwin and Evans as well. I will pass on Philly. Number 22, I got the Jags at Houston, and in division with no Mixon or Tank Dell, there's a chance they show up, but they haven't showed up at all this year. I would definitely avoid it with Jacksonville. And then the Broncos at the Jets. The Jets offense looked good last week with a mini bye to prepare. I will not trust Denver. They have no answer for Breece Hall over the last 2 years. 24 and 25, I got the Ravens and Bills in what I expect to be a massive shootout. The score could be 40-35, and I'll leave both defenses on the bench. Number 26, I got the Rams at Chicago, and Caleb has been rough so far, so maybe some turnovers are looming here. However, the Rams have a very leaky secondary, and I'm not dying to trust them. I think they lose this game. Number 27 and 28, I got the Bengals and Panthers. This game could be a shootout, honestly, and I don't want to trust either defense. The Bengals look terrible on defense so far. Number 29, I told you to bench the Giants. That looked like the right call. Number 30 and 31, I got the Cardinals and Commanders. This game is also another shootout. I'll avoid it. And lastly, I have the Patriots at San Francisco. The 49ers will empty the clip and probably hang 40. No way, Jose. So these are my rankings this week at all 3 positions, the top 20 for quarterback, tight end, and defense. And I think you're pretty confident in the top 12 quarterbacks. I think Caleb is a very good play this week, a definite upgrade. He is my favorite streamer. If you're in that spot at quarterback. However, once you hit Anthony Richardson, I think there is a legit amount of risk. And if it wasn't for some upside with talented guys like him, Baker, Jordan Love, Darnold, and Geno, I don't think I'd be interested at all. So Aaron Rodgers is the cutoff point in Superflex formats. I think I'm trying to pivot elsewhere. And I really think only the top 12 are guys you're trusting. So good luck at quarterback, but there are some excellent matchups for guys like Stroud, Purdy, and Caleb. We'll see what happens this week. Maybe Mahomes comes back to elite. But at tight end, good luck with Kelce. I honestly feel pretty risky ranking him at number 1, but it should pay off. That's what we're expecting. Once you hit Kyle Pitts, Sam LaPorta, Mark Andrews, yikes, you are very, very concerned, and you might as well be streaming the position. But I think the last guy you're even considering to stream would be Tyler Conklin. Starting with Schultz, you are desperate for touchdowns, so no thank you outside the top 13. At defense, though, I think the top 11 are legit. I think once you get past the Browns, however, it is pretty dicey, and you probably just want to keep them on the waiver wire, if not your bench. So good luck to you in week 4. I hope you win. If you still have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below, and I will answer your start-sit questions before kickoff. But if you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.